Today I'm going to show you how I decorate this Demon Slayer cake. Come join me. So this cake is a single layer vanilla cake. So I started with putting some buttercream onto my cake board to hold it still as I'm decorating. I'm just going to start off with doing a crumb coat of the cake. So this is a very thin layer of icing. You're still going to be able to see the icing coming through, and now here I'm doing the actual first layer of icing. That's actually to cover the cake. So I'm making sure that the icing is nice and crisp edges along the top and sides of the cake, so it's nice and smooth. And once I have that done, I am adding some raspberry filling into the cake. After I started to do this, I decided that I was going to do something a little different. So I'm going to add some raspberry to the top, which you see me doing here. And then I decided to add some raspberry buttercream here onto the top as well. So after I did this, I then went back and I added some additional buttercream onto the side just to build it up a little bit over the top. I knew that I was putting a piece of fondant onto the top, so I didn't have to fill this whole top in. So I'm just kind of brushing over the top of the cake to keep it from seeping out of the top of the cake. So I'm just kind of brushing this a little bit to keep it, as I mentioned, from coming over the top. So now I'm moving on to doing a bit of the topper. So this is a Demon Slayer image. It's an edible image. I printed this out. Now I'm just cutting out these pieces. Once I have these cut out, I'm going to be putting them on top of a piece of blue fondant. So I'm just going, I used an X-Acto knife to cut it out. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to be putting this onto a piece of fondant. So there is one piece that's going to go on top, and then there's also some pieces that are going to go onto the side. So you'll notice that there's some thin pieces of fondant and also some thicker pieces of fondant. The thicker pieces are so that my pieces will stand up better onto the side of the cake. So I used a cake pan here to measure the size that I wanted this to be on top of the cake, and I'm just cutting that piece out, and I'm going to put that bigger round piece of fondant onto the top, and then I'm going to put that edible image onto the top here. So I'm using a little bit of water to adhere it to that fondant. You can see me doing that right there. So once I have that on, I'm going to move on to doing these smaller images, but the fondant's going to be thicker because I want these pieces to stand at the sides of the cake, and I need them to stand sturdy. So I want it to be thicker fondant. You can see that it's probably about a ½ inch thick here. So now I'm just cutting each of these pieces out so that I can stand these pieces to the side of the cake. You can see I'm just kind of cutting each one of those individual pieces out, and little by little I'm pulling those pieces of fondant away from that edible image to make sure that there's no distorting of the fondant that's underneath the image. So here I am just putting a red border along the bottom. It's a star tip. I'm going to do the same thing on top of the cake around that blue piece of fondant, just to cover that edge up. Here I'm brushing off any excess powdered sugar that's along the edge, doing a shell border on the top. And then I'm going to put those thicker pieces of fondant with the images along the front of the cake. And with that, that's pretty much going to finish the cake. If you enjoyed watching this video, I do encourage you to like, comment, and share. And I also would love if you would subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any future content. I would love if you would watch anytime that I post future content. This is what the cake looks like. And again, thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate you watching. Here's the top of the cake, and have a great day. Thank you again for watching.